Well, this first part of the State Capture Inquiry's report deals with issues related to South African Airways, as you were just hearing. It also then addresses the New Age business breakfast. You'll recall the New Age newspaper was owned by the Gupta family. There are also findings to do with SARS and the Revenue Service, the former Commissioner Tom Moyane. So then several professionals, high-profile business leaders and prominent companies will all likely emerge as implicated persons, as we're already starting to see ahead of the release of the rest of the two outstanding reports from the inquiry. This has again thrust the private sector into the spotlight for its role in corruption. For more on this, we can speak to Business Unity South Africa President Bonang Mohale. Mr. Mohale, always good to have you on the program. So, apart from confirming much of what had already been reported on over the years, what is your take on what we've heard so far from part one of the report?
Baba Tembegile, thank you so much for having me. It's genuinely appreciated. So as business, I think South Africans are tired of commissions. What they want to see is people being charged, prosecuted, and them in orange overalls. 4 years later, 400 days of hearings, and more than 300 witnesses at a cost of R1 billion South African rands. This report number one is 874 pages. It has 3 volumes, and it deals, as you rightly say, with SAA and its associate companies, South African Airways Technical Services, South African Express and Air Chefs. The second volume speaks to the New Age, and the third speaks to the South African Revenue Services. This is 3 volumes of report number one of 3 reports that are yet to come. Some of the preliminary findings, for a lack of a better word, Baba Tembegile, says former President Zuma was dishonest and fled from accountability, that he was vulgar and calculating in betraying his people, that he helped Guptas capture the state, that the former president was front and center in colluding with the private sector to capture the South African Revenue Services, that the ANC abused the government tender system, that former Joburg Mayor Jeff Makubo twice asked for and received donations for the ANC before contracting for services for the city, that Guptas used pawns to milk the more than 740 state-owned enterprises and state-owned companies, that government should re-examine all contracts with Bain and Company with a view to enable the NPA's prosecution, that former Minister Malusi Gigaba was prepared to do wrong for Guptas and Zuma in reappointing Messrs. Siyabonga Gama as CEO of Transnet Freight Rail and Mr. Brian Molefe as Group CEO of Transnet over a much better qualified and a better performed, therefore higher scores from Dr. Mandla Gancho, that the following people must be charged: Babu Tom Moyane with perjury, that Tony Gupta, Brian Molefe, and Colin Machila over corruption and incompetence, and the irregular New Age deals, that Ms. Dudu Moyane and her son Talente for corruption and incompetence, that Regiment Capital's Eric Wood and Niven Pillay, together with the former SA Treasurer Petulo Ramusibudi, should be charged for corruption. That Ms. Yake Kwinana, the former non-executive director of SAA, should also be charged. And lastly, that Ms. Nontsasa Memela, the former SAA technical procurement head, should also be charged. Baba Tembegile.
So this report then, does it successfully do away with the South African myth that corruption is a public sector thing? Does it finally prove that the private sector too is just as corrupt?
In fact, we have always known that it takes 2 to tango. that even though the public sector plays with public money, therefore we should hold them to a higher degree of final accountability, standards, mores, and folkways. We have always known that there are some ugly, bad companies, private, that have benefited, like USASA, like VBS, like Bain and Company, that also aided and abetted state capture, like the very first company that we suspended in the days that I was with Business Leadership South Africa was a private sector company, KPMG, that under the tutelage of Professor Lumkile Wiseman Kuhlu has turned the corner and demonstrated beyond any shadow of doubt that it wants to mend its way. It is contrite. That contrition is an ongoing process that we have to continuously ask for forgiveness and be eternally grateful for the mercy shown. So yes, there are some private sector companies that they themselves must go to jail, like McKinsey, like PwC, that has been cited in this report number 1, Baba Tembekile.
Mm-hmm. Do you trust in that context that there will be justice, prosecutions, successful prosecutions of people across the public and private sectors, given the context in which we're living, where we have an NPA in this country that has already said that it has a serious issue with resources, including shortages of budget?
You are absolutely correct, and you hit the nail on the head. So when President Matamela came into office, there were 4 commissions of inquiry that were running concurrently, simultaneously, and in parallel, including the Nugent Commission and the commission into SARS, and also the fitness of Mohwebi to hold public office. But you see, what is different about this is because the timing is absolutely right. The South Africans, 60.1 million of them, have lost their patience and have spoken so loudly in the local government elections, where 70% of them stayed away and didn't even bother to vote. There's something different about this report, because the president has said for the first time is enacted and therefore promulgated enabling legislation that during the Zondo Commission, as and when the witnesses were testifying, that NPA is fully empowered to gather that evidence and start prosecuting people. It is sad, tragic, and regrettable that 3 years later, not any of the big fish has been prosecuted. But you see, this report number 1, with its 3 volumes, is absolutely comprehensive in the evidence that it forwards, but it also publishes the rebuttals, so-called rebuttals, by some of the implicated people. When it says Ms. Dudu Muyeni was ruling by fear and had inculcated a culture that aided and enabled state capture, all she could say, and it is published, is, but I deny. So the facts are there to speak for themselves.
So as a way forward then, the inquiry then says it's recommending the adoption of a national charter against corruption for adoption by both the private and public sector, so government and business, as well as other relevant stakeholders. How helpful do you think that will be? Because any company and every entity has a charter where it promises to conduct business ethically, but that doesn't mean they do.
We support that, but we also say as business that there's more than a myriad of legislation that is more than sufficient in dealing with bribery, stealing, and cheating. The Anti-Bribery and Corruption Act, the Corrupt Foreign Practices Act, the FICA regulations, but also just criminal justice system and the common laws dictate that we should not wait until we move forward. We are the first as business to say we need a social compact amongst labor, government, business, and civil society that says there must be a new culture, a new ethos. We can't have leaders that steal from their own people. We can't have a situation where we don't question, we don't interrogate the way we choose our leaders. that it is the ANC itself that is on trial here, because it is the ANC's cadre deployment that is at the heart of this that we are talking about. That it is the ANC that were the primary benefactors through Chancellor House, through having organized the January the 8th, but also conferences that are paid for by Busasa money, that since probably 2012 have probably siphoned off 14 billion rands, aided by some of the prominent ministers and some of them who were members of the top six of the ANC. So I think the president is absolutely correct and needs to be supported when we say every single solitary one of those people that are named with a demonstrable evidence must find themselves with orange overalls. That's the only way we'll send the message that says not in our name. Baba Tembeki.
Bonang Mohale, President of Business Unity South Africa, always good to speak to you. Thank you for your time.